Good afternoon and welcome to our weekly Wednesday creativity workshop with Adobe Education. Today is Wednesday, November 13th, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Ross Wallis, who is an Adobe Education Leader Emeritus and will be joining us from the United Kingdom. Ross will be sharing Arty fun with Adobe mobile apps. So Ross, I'll let you take it from here. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me. As Clara says, I spent my teaching career as an art teacher, but I've very recently retired, but I'm still doing some stuff with Adobe and still very excited about the new stuff that's coming out. So quite a lot of what I'm going to do this evening is on the new stuff, particularly Fresco, a little bit of Photoshop maybe, but also I'm going to show how it's come through my students over at least the last decade and possibly two, and show some examples of their work as well. So if I can go straight into a screen share, just to make sure that this is going to work.
Looking great so far.
Can you see my iPad?
Yep, we can see the whole screen.
It's the iPad that I'm after. Is that up?
Yep, can see it
Great.
perfectly.
So I've got a folder here of all the Adobe apps, and there are lots of them. And I realise that I'm probably speaking here to people who really know these things, possibly even better than I. But maybe there's always one or two things that you might not have made those connections. Or some ideas as to how you can use software in a slightly different way, perhaps, or coming from the perspective of an art teacher. So I'm going to go first into Adobe Capture, which I just think is a phenomenal map. I love this app, and these are some of the captures that I've created over the last little while. If you go into the camera, into the photo library button here, I'm actually going to go into my camera roll and pick out a silly photograph of me that I took recently, just to show you how this works. And it's turning that image directly into just a monotone, a black and white. And you've got a slider where you can choose the amount of black and white. And you can just hit the tick and that will save the image. You can then refine it, you can rub bits out, and then you just hit the save button, and that's saved directly into your Adobe library if you have a cloud account. And I've been playing around lots. I find that beardy guys are absolutely great. For some reason, beards come out beautifully, and face paints and various things. And they're just making great characters, really. So it's then what I've done with these, and what I discovered was that just take that one and save it. I'm going to save this one just onto my camera roll and open up Adobe Comp, which is another brilliant app. Just hit the plus button on Adobe Comp to get a new, I'm going to go for an iPad landscape. Again, I'm sure most of you will have used this before. And this is just an idea. If I want to bring in a picture, I can just make a, sorry, I did that wrong. Let's go back. Make a rectangle and put a cross in it. And that recognizes that that's a picture holder. I can then go in onto my device and pick out that image that I just created and put it into here. I could then perhaps make a shape just like that. You'll recognize that that's a shape. I could make another shape just with a finger. Make myself a speech bubble. Just go back into that one and adjust it slightly. Make a slightly prettier speech bubble. And then if I do this and put some lines in it, I get text. And I can then just tap into there, and I can just use the iPad here to record my voice and give me some text recognition, which I always think is really cool. Okay. And it's just a great and very quick and easy way of making cartoons. I just did one a while back, slightly more complicated as a demo. That was just a little bit taken from Alice in Wonderland, using some different pictures that I found. But I think that could be a great project, not just for art, although I'm an art specialist, but that could be great in, say, Shakespeare in an English class, or explaining a science experiment in a science class. That could be used right across the curriculum. And it's just so quick and easy and just so haptic, using, hang on, where are we? Adobe Comp. Right, I'm going to just hide that a moment and show you some pictures, some examples of students' work. I hope this is going to work okay. Actually, these aren't students. That's a drawing that I did this afternoon using Fresco, and I'm absolutely loving Fresco. I don't know whether I can zoom in a bit. The thing about Fresco that I'm really loving is the way that the brushes can bleed into each other. And for doing quick sketches from life, it gives a drawing a real dynamism and there's a real feel to it. So that's direct drawing straight onto an iPad, which I realise is, unless you're a trained artist, is quite a difficult thing to get into. So I just want to show you some tricks here. Actually, that's another one done a couple of weeks ago. One of my passions is life drawing, and I'm doing a lot of life drawing on the iPad. I really enjoy it. So these are just drawings of mine from the last week or two, using Fresco. But also, a long time ago, when iPads first came out, I did some experimenting using an art app. I can't remember whether it was brushes or it might have been Procreate, with a smudge tool, actually taking a photograph and then smudging the photograph to make the work of art, which is totally different to this drawing, because really what you're doing is tracing on top of a photograph. But I sort of feel that it's quite legitimate in many ways to do that. I don't have a problem with that. And it's a really good way of working with students. Just as a historical, by the way, this is, I can't remember the artist's name, French artist and photographer, 100-odd years ago, who was doing quite a lot of work where he took photographs and then played around with photographic negative and smudged it and changed it and sort of turned them into paintings. It was a whole style of photography 100-odd years ago, which was called the Posterists. I think it was the Posterists. I'd have to look that one up. But worth exploring, worth looking at. So a little bit later, I'm just going to demonstrate.
Oh, a quick question from the chat.
Yeah.
So as you're kind of going through all these different examples, do you primarily use a stylus or Apple Pencil? I know with Fresco, there's the pencil that you use as well, versus kind of the direct touch painting?
Mostly I use an Apple Pencil,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, it's partly because I'm an artist and I'm very used to drawing with a pencil. I think Steve Jobs would be rolling in his grave because his idea with the iPad was that he didn't want a pencil, he didn't want a stylus. He said it was to be done with a finger, and it is actually really nice just drawing with a finger, and very possible. But yes, mostly I use a stylus. But obviously in school, I wouldn't be able to afford a stylus for the students. I'll have one in a classroom maybe, but I certainly wouldn't have a set of them. And I wouldn't necessarily even have iPads as well. The school that I've been teaching at is going entirely Surface Pro. So it's great that Fresco's out on Surface Pro now as well. Let me go. This is going back a very long way. This is an image created by one of my young students, 11-year-old, I think, nearly 20 years ago now, using Photoshop. And this image won a prize in the UK. And it's sort of what got me going on digital art. And it was just so easy to do. This was just a fun little project where the student took a photograph of themselves, mirrored the image, so they cut it halfway down the middle, used the layers to duplicate that layer and flip it, and then they made a composite out of that one, then put another layer on top, which they added a Gaussian blur to, and then rubbed through. It's very easy to do. I might demonstrate it if we have time, and they have great fun with it. So it's a little project that I've done quite a lot. And so I've sort of updated that to work in Fresco. This was just a little experiment. Fresco doesn't have a smudge tool, and it doesn't have a Gaussian blur yet. I'm hoping and thinking that maybe those will arrive in time. But using the watercolor brushes is a great alternative to get that sort of blurry effect. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate. This was just another fun idea, using silhouettes and duplicating them again. And there's all sorts of stuff that you can do with that. So that's not a good one. This was a little project that I've been playing around with. I'm going to use next week on an Adobe Education course to show Fresco. And this is based on the work of Julian Opie, who's a British artist. Let's just look up. Find some Julian Opie images. He's most famous for creating the cover of Blur, the cover of a Blur album long ago. But it's worth looking at his website. He does some great stuff. So this is just a sort of Julian Opie ripoff, but it's a great project to do with kids. I'm just going to open up Fresco and create a new document. Just hit the Create New button. I can go into an A4 size, and I'm going to import a picture from my camera roll. Actually, let's just go into portraits and then I can find it a bit quicker maybe. There we go. That's the one I used. So I've loaded an image file and I can rescale that. Just hit done. And I'm going to put a drawing layer above it.
Oh, really quickly, Ross, we're not seeing the iPad screen.
Oh, sorry.
Let's see.
I hid it. Thank you.
There we go.
I could have gone on for ages, couldn't I? Shall I go back, or did you sort of get that?
Yeah, maybe go back a little bit, just to check.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
So I'm just going Create New down the bottom here. I'm just going to pick an A4. There are so many choices there. And then I'm going to hit actually, if I put my touches on, showing. Is it showing the touches?
Yep.
View gestures. I think it's that one. No, it's not that
Yep.
one. Where's the show touches? Can't find it. I'll have to do without, I'm afraid. I'm going to go
Lucas says
into.
by the red button.
Yeah. Can you see it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? App settings.
He says the V
View
next to the red
gestures.
button.
V next to the red button.
The V, oh, next to the red, on the Mac. Not near record. If you go by the record, he said there's like a little V like drop down next to the record button, that big red circle.
Can't see it. No, sorry, that was on. It's on my iPad that I'm trying to find it.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
Yeah,
Well,
just to show the touches on the screen.
yeah.
But I can't find it quickly. It's there somewhere. I'll just go in and do this. So I'm going into photos. This is looking at photos on my iPad. Going to go into portraits. That's loaded an image. And I'm going to swap these two layers around so that I get a drawing layer on top. And then just trace on top of this image using a vector brush, which is really nice. I love the way the vector brush flows, and this actually works really well with a finger as well. This is the stylus. You can see with the stylus that if I press harder, it goes fatter. So the stylus gives it a bit more variety than a finger, but it works okay with a finger. So I can then get another layer with the plus button and use the selection tool just to select an area to fill in. So let's just start with that area. And then I'm going to press a finger on the screen until I get the color picker. I think I have to tell this to be a pixel layer, otherwise the color picker is not going to work. Let's just go back. That's another really useful thing. If you just touch the screen with two fingers on an iPad, that will take you back a step. So converting this to a pixel layer, then if I put my finger on it, it should come up with a color picker. It's not. So I'm just going to pick a color and then use the fill to fill that in, and then hide that layer. Pick another layer, deselect, and work. I should do things too quickly here. Go to the selection tool. Pick the next bit, and then again, just want this as a pixel layer. I'm going to choose a color, choose the fill, and fill it in. You can see how that will build up, and then put my drawing layer on top. So let's just go back and look at this one that I created. And you can see all the different layers down the side and how they've been drawn on top. If I save that, just do a quick export back into my photo library, then I could go back into Adobe Comp and open this one up. Bring that in as a picture. It's going to immediately recognise it as a picture folder, I can go in and do it like that. I really like, you can also do an oval, put a cross in it, do the same, and it will automatically put a mask on it. That's just so clever. I absolutely love it. So that was a quick example in Adobe Fresco of a project that would be, I would imagine, specifically an art project. But it's so easy to do, to trace on top. Let me just go back now and show you some more examples here of these. These are all done in Photoshop rather than Fresco, because these were done before I retired last year. Some of them are just so inventive. This guy, Ed, he really got into doing this, and it just sort of took off. So while he started with faces, he moved on and started tracing other things as well. You can see in this one, perhaps using a brush to make the hair, which would work really well in Fresco. This is Ed again. He did lots of them, and they got more and more complicated. Not that one. If I can find another one of Ed's. No, I've lost it. I'll have to come back into it in a minute. This is just another idea. This was a trip to a museum. This was actually going to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. And we took some tablets, and the students actually did their drawing in the museum on the tablets, which I thought was fun. And that was I just loved that image. That's a 10, 11-year-old, I think, just drawing straight onto the tablet. But for those that weren't that confident at drawing, we used basically what I just showed you, which is taking a photograph and then maybe blurring it a bit and drawing on top. So these are sort of tracings rather than drawings, but they then use them as illustrations in their own work. And again, this would be fabulous, not just for art. I would have thought across the curriculum, if you're wanting to make illustrations and make them get students to make their own personal illustrations, then using something like Fresco to trace over an image and make it your own. I think that's just such a great idea.
We have a question from the chat. How old were most of the students that created these? I know you mentioned a 12-year-old for one of them.
These are 12-year-olds, yes.
12-year-olds.
These are all 12-year-olds. These ones. I think these ones were a little bit older. They're probably 13-year-olds. I do that. I was doing that project with a slightly older group, but these are the younger ones. This was actually, I don't know if anyone's visited the UK. If you do, and you find yourself in Oxford, go to the Pitt Rivers Museum, because it is just the most amazing museum in the world. In fact, I suggest you Google Pitt Rivers, because they've got some 3D interactive cameras or whatever in the museum. You can actually do a sort of virtual tour of the museum, and it is just the most crazy museum. This dodo, we believe, well, we were pretty sure, is the dodo that appears in Alice in Wonderland, because Lewis Carroll, Charles Dodsworth, was a maths professor at Oxford University, and he would have wandered through and seen this dodo every day, because the rooms where he did his lectures were in the same building. So yes, the Natural History Museum and the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. So let's just, I'll do a quick demonstration of that. Let's go back into Fresco again. And I'm going to look for get the plus button. Oh, I've got to show you my screen again. Where are we? Plus button down here to create a new file. I'm just going to pick a landscape this time. Just see what landscape. Actually, if I go to the home screen, it should give me just a screen size one. I can't see it. Let's just go in, create an A2. And I want it to be landscape. I'm just going to turn it around. So again, I'm going to go in and bring in some from my photos. This time I want some flowers. I've got some flowers down here somewhere. Still life. They will do. I'm doing these demonstrations next week, so I'm going to practice a bit. I might get it a bit better by then. So there we go. I've brought in an image. I have to hit the done button once it's scaled. Again, I'm just going to put a tracing layer over the top. This will automatically become a vector layer the moment I start drawing on it, because it recognizes that I'm using a vector brush. And you can tell that it's a vector layer because it will have that little dot beside it. If it's a picture layer, it's got a little picture. If it's a pixel layer, it's got a little image of pixels. So I'm not going to do this because I want to waste time doing the drawing, but a very quick scribble will do. Just to show you, if I then go back to my image layer, the one below, and turn it into a pixel layer, and then go into the watercolor brushes, and let's just quite a big watercolor brush. I'm going to get the brush as big as I can possibly do it, with the flow as high as I can do it, and put the water flow up really high as well. And crucially, turn the opacity right down to 0. And then I can just draw on top of this layer, and it should blur. I don't know what's happening here. My demos never work. It should blur what's underneath. Blurring very well. But I'm hoping you can get the idea. I think it's just running very slowly because it's quite a big image that I'm using. Just go back to the screen. Yeah, it's a huge image. I should have made it a bit smaller. I'll go back and show you one that I did before. If I turn some of these layers off, I can get back to the blurry layer. So that's using just a watercolor brush, but without any pigment, to blur that layer. And it can be fabulously effective. I'll just start a new one. I'll do it a little bit smaller so it works a little bit quicker. Go into my home screen, into my photos, pick that silly photograph of me. Didn't want to stretch it.
I love this idea so much, Ross.
Yeah.
We have some comments in there of just a really great to introduce students to drawing, and I love the tracing idea. And Teresa mentioned these projects are great for adults too. So many adults that she teaches don't think they can draw, and it's a beautiful final work of art.
It's just so easy, but it gives you some confidence. It sort of gets rid of that feeling of having a white sheet in front of you, which can be really scary. because you're actually working from something. So let me just show you this, because let's get my watercolor brush. I need to turn this into a pixel layer in order for it to work, and very small. Big. I want this to be off. You can see how that's blurring the image. Do it with the pencil. And I could then bring that image that I created, but that gives me a problem here because it's not coming in as a transparent layer. And I could, I guess, go back into here, turn it into a pixel layer, use an eraser, and sort of laboriously take out the white. For some reason, and I'm not sure, again, I'm sure this will come, but at the moment, Fresco isn't importing an SGV file. So I found a quick workaround to this. I'm hoping this is making sense. If I go into Adobe Capture and export this image to the camera roll, is that what I did? That should then come in transparent image. To Fresco. Did get this working earlier.
Okay. We have a quick question while you're doing that. Do you discuss copyright with your students, or do they only trace the pictures that they take themselves?
I do two things here. Mostly I get them to take their own photographs. You can use anything from a site called pexels.com, P-E-X-E-L-S, pexels.com, which are royalty-free images. Or in a Google search, you can go into the advanced search and look for images that you can update. So yes, we talk about copyright a lot whenever we're doing this sort of project. Or as an art teacher, I'm often using famous works of art, in which case, if they're over a certain age, I sort of feel in a school that we're relatively safe. Sometimes the work of art itself, the picture of the work of art, is copyright. And there's a library of images called the Bridgman Library that schools can subscribe to, and you can then get free artwork from the Bridgman Library. But in a school setting, if it's reproducing a piece of artwork, I'm actually not too troubled by that. But yes, using Pexels is great.
I just shared that in the chat.
Yeah. My demonstration has gone wrong though, because this should come in as a transparent layer, and I'm just wondering what I've done wrong. Oh, I know what I've done wrong. I want another step. This is my workaround. I'm actually going to open that image up in Photoshop Mix. So let's just go into Mix, into the plus button, and select that image from my camera roll. I'm bringing that into Mix, and then I can use the selection, the cutout tool in Mix. So I'm using Smart tool here, and I can cut out the areas. This is going to take a little while, but again, just doing that very quickly and very badly. I think that I want to take the inverse, and then I'm just going to save that one to my camera roll. And that now should have saved with transparency. I hope I'm not doing this too quick. I hope people are getting this. This is a moment just to work around, because I'm sure that it's the intention to bring transparent images into Fresco in the very near future, because it would make absolute sense. Let's go back in now. No, I don't want my camera. What am I doing? I want my pictures, my photos. And bring that last one in. That should now have come in as a transparent image, or you can see, you can get the idea anyway. Where I did the selection in mix, it's become transparent. So you can put a transparent image over the top and build up an image that way. So let's go back into my examples. That one. I think. Not that layer. No, that was a hand-drawn layer, actually. I think I did one where I did this through Capture and then Mix and then brought it onto the iPad. But it possibly wasn't that one.
That's also an interesting look, though, too.
Yeah, no, I've got rid of that one as well. We'll go back. But it's, I mean, that's another idea. All this sort of stuff needs playing about with and experimenting with. But they're sort of fun little projects to do with students in school. That was one that I spent a little bit more time over, just playing around and messing around with it. And you can see the capture layer in there. Just turn these layers off. And I also put another layer in here, that one, which is just using those beautiful watercolor brushes to put a little bit of wash in. And you're getting an image that's a little bit like a pop, pop image, an Andy Warhol or a Lichtenstein or something like that. That works really well. So that's Fresco. Let's go back. How am I doing for time?
Good. We have 20 minutes left in the hour, so take as much as you would like. Or if you want to stop earlier, we can open it up to Q&A. And Therese says that she loves these projects and how you're using multiple apps to create something so unique. And Hannah also says a really fun project.
Well, I'll go on a little bit because there's a few other ideas here. These are some, again, going back to some earlier student works, and most of these were done in Photoshop, I think, but they could easily be done on a mobile app. You could do these in Mix, and of course now we've got Photoshop, the full Photoshop, in a mobile version. That's just brilliant. The selection tools are at the moment better in Mix than they are in the new Photoshop on iPad. So I'm still thinking that using Mix is a good idea. But here's just some very simple montage ideas of using a sideways face and a front face in one image. This was a project, always cracks me up, where you get the students to take photographs of each other and pair up, and you create a composite which is the top half of one person and the bottom half of someone else. So this was the demo I did, which just always makes me laugh, which is I'm the top half and my teaching assistant was the bottom half. And it's, again, Photoshop Mix, or you could do this in Fresco, you could do this in the new Photoshop Mobile. And it's a really good fun project. And montages, some of you, if you know me, will have seen these lots before, because these are from some time ago. But I really like making a montage or encouraging students to make a montage, which is just very simple. That was one of my students long ago. This guy using Photoshop, he was, I think, an 8-year-old at the time he did that,
Wow.
which I found really impressive because he's got this transparency in his finger as well. So, I mean, that was just phenomenally clever. This one wasn't one of my students. I found this on the internet, but I loved it. If you type in Mona Lisa into Google, or Mona Lisa altered or something like that, you will find hundreds upon hundreds of altered versions of the Mona Lisa. And there's another great fun project. Just so simple, putting 2 images together, which is what these digital apps are so good at doing when you've got layers and layer masks. So you've got layer masks in Fresco, you've got layer masks in Photoshop, and you've got transparency. So you can do fun stuff like that, which is a student's face pressed up against a bit of glass, photographed, and then the photograph of the bottle. The 2 layers are put together, and then the face layer has just got a little bit of transparency on it, so the bottle is showing through a bit more, which makes the face look as if it's sort of sitting behind the bottle. And then there's just a mask so that the face fits the bottle, or an eraser, whatever. I can't remember what he did, but again, that could be done in Photoshop, Fresco, or Mix. These are some really spooky ones that I was playing around with. But again, I developed this into a student project where they took a photograph of themselves and a photograph of a doll, and then mixed the 2 together. Very Halloween sort of project. Those are some of the examples that I did to inspire them. I haven't got any of the students' work here, and some of it was a bit scary. But again, a lot of this stuff doesn't necessarily have to just stay in the art room. I love the idea of storytelling, and for a storytelling you sort of need a narrator, and for a narrator you can use an image of yourself or a cartoon. If you don't want to use a photograph of yourself, you can use these ideas to create cartoons of yourself, which then become the narrator, or indeed, to use on your social media. I'm just flipping through some examples that I picked out. This was a professional artist who had never used a tablet before, or a drawing program, and I encouraged her to do it. She was my artist in residence just a few years back. I can't remember what app she was using to do this. It's pre-Fresco, obviously, but it really shows how you can use layers, because there's a drawing layer underneath, and then a texture layer above that, and then the white hand-drawn layer for the fur. So putting those 3 layers together created a stunning image, but very simply. And if you put the tracing layer in as well, if you're competent at drawing, so you start with tracing and then work with those 3 layers. So the tracing layer, the photograph first, the tracing layer, and then a tonal layer, and then a white on top to make it really stand out. That's a great sort of work process. These are some other student images that are combining layers. I love that one. Again, that was really early on, just after I got iPads in school. And it was a student who did a montage of different sunsets and made it like a stained glass. But that's the first example I showed, which was the Julian Opie one. That's using the same technique, but using a landscape rather than a portrait. So you don't have to stick with those ideas. This is another, again, if people know me, they'll know that I've been really addicted to this idea of layer tennis or image ping pong, or whatever you call it. And these were just a couple of examples of a game that I was playing with another AEL a few years ago, where I sent her a few of my photographs, and she used a drawing app to combine them and create a work of art from my photographs. and then she sent me some of her photographs, and I montaged them and turned them into an image. For those of you who know her or remember her, it was Nicole Delasio did these two images. So these were both her works of art, but using my photographs, which is a sort of a little variant on the Photoshop ping pong idea. In the Photoshop ping pong, you would carry on building up an image layer after layer. I think I might have one here, that one. Yes, I hope this will work. This was done by some students long ago. So this is the classic sort of game of Photoshop ping pong, where one image blends into the next.
Oh, very cool.
And then turning it into a movie at the end. Well, I love that one. Really fabulous. Wow. And this one as well. This was a game of Photoshop ping pong done with me and another AEL in the States. I think this might have been Marley. No, it wasn't. It was Barbara. Remember her surname. It runs fairly slow, this one. But if I speed through it, you can see the idea of how the layers build up, layer upon layer.
And this was done with different students?
No, this one was
the AEL.
This was me and another AEL. But that was a great way of learning the software and also sharing AEL to AEL. But I've done a lot of it with students in school. What I tend to find with students in school is that some of them will pick up on it and some of them won't. Because you've only got sort of one lesson a week, what works really well with this is if it's coming back and forth fairly quickly. So it often works better if you're just doing it within a classroom rather than trying to share it with other schools. But we have done it with other schools and it has worked quite well. We've done some other ones which are great, where collaborating with other schools. There was one we did with a school in Australia where we sent them a description of a bit of our school from a photograph, but not the photograph. And then they created a picture of what they thought our school looked like from the description, and then sent us back the picture. That was a great one. But I love this idea of collaborating. Just a couple more ideas here. If you create a great work of art, have a look on Google and find some picture frames to put it in, because that works wonderfully. And rather than using an app that will give you a ready-made frame, make your own just by taking a photograph of a frame and adding it in. That's where that one went. This was my friend Ed. I think he was about 12, 13 at the time. He just really got into this tracing idea, and he would sit there for hours. This is just him on the settee. He's actually drawing what's in front of him. So that was a photograph he took, sat on the settee that I have in my art room, and drawing the rest of the art room. And he spent hours doing it. One last idea. Again, this is from a while back, and I'm not sure how well this would work in Fresco, but it might do, and I haven't tried it yet. But this is basically taking the idea of photographs of two different people. So the person on the top is different to the person on the bottom, and then it's been smudged together. So one of my asks for Adobe is that they put a smudge tool into Fresco. But the watercolor brush does work. The watercolor brush will do that. There's another one. Again, similar idea of two different faces and then using smudge tools. So I'm just going to show you one more thing in Fresco. I could choose one of my drawings actually. These are just they're not very good drawings. These were very quick drawings that I was doing folk club where people are singing music, and I was just trying to quickly draw the performers as they drew. But I love the watercolor brushes for doing those initial sketches because it's very loose and it's very free. And when you come to this, export this. Let's just go into the
I think we're not
export.
seeing your screen.
Ah, I've done it again. Thank you. Here we go. So yes, this is just a quick drawing that I did in a folk club at a music night of the people singing. But it's just this watercolor brush where it bleeds and blends. It's a beautiful tool for drawing. And when you come to do an export, you can export it as a time lapse.
Oh, wow.
And you can see how the drawing's built up. Yeah? Which gives me another idea, which is that you could use this as an animating tool. So you could actually, let's just pick another one for the fun. See what happens with this one. Go export. Show it as a time lapse.
Very cool.
But I mean I love that they've built that feature into Fresco. But I'm thinking that you could animate with this as well, because you could do a little drawn animation, save it, and then do the next little bit and save it, and do the next little bit and save it, and build up quite a long animation actually using Fresco.
Definitely.
I think I might actually stop there. I was going to show a little bit in Photoshop, but I've only had this for about a week, so I'm as new to it as everyone else, and I'm just beginning to play and experiment with it and see what it will do. So I think that might wait for another occasion. But yes, do go and play with Capture and Comp and Fresco, because they're fantastic and very creative tools. So if we've got a little bit of time, a tiny little bit of time, if people want to ask me some questions.
Yeah, no, well, thank you so much, Ross. I'll stop the recording there, but so many amazing examples here, and I'm excited to learn even more about Fresco and keep trying out some of the new features and functionality. Another thing I just shared in the chat was from the Adobe Sneaks from Max, and so some of the products in beta that our engineers are working on. One of them really reminded me of Image Tango, so I shared the link in there, and the like Image Tango, where you can draw something in Fresco and take a photograph, and it automatically will create many different iterations of that photograph and that drawing. It's really amazing. So when you were showing me this, I'm like, that's the future of where the technology is going. So
I'd like to join up to that. There's from Max. There's also, I noticed, Photoshop Camera. I haven't had a chance to play with that yet, but that looks fun.
Yeah.
Sure, we can do some creative stuff with that.
Definitely. No, it's exciting seeing kind of all the possibilities.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chat, but I'll stop the recording there. Thank you so much, Ross, for your time. And are there any other links that you want to share with people who are watching the recording, or a website that they can check out?
There's quite a lot of stuff on my own website, which is just rosswallis.org. And there'll be links through to other stuff. But I'm very happy to have people send me an email and have a chat. And if anyone wants to collaborate, that'd be even more fun. And also, I've got quite a lot of examples up on the Ed Exchange of various of these projects. So if you look for me on the Ed Exchange, you'll find a lot.
Perfect. Well, thank you again so much, Ross. And I love the idea of collaboration and some of the ideas that you shared with, making that continual Photoshop project, or, having the description that you send another classroom and they actually then create the image. I think there's a lot of possibilities there. So looking forward to seeing more collaboration with our community. And thank you for those who are tuning into the recording, and we'll see you next week.